So before we get started, before Michelle's introduction, how many of you in the room, by show of hands, had heard of Substack? Look at that. That's cool.
Pretty good.
Leave your hand up if you are a subscriber to a Substack. Cool. And leave your hand up if you are a writer on Substack. Yes. Love it. You have a friendly crowd here.
Yeah, it's nice. Thanks, everyone.
I love it. Hamish and I had an opportunity to meet a few weeks ago, right at the tail end of your TED Talk. Congratulations. It was awesome. And I actually want to start by asking you to what you attribute all of this success. What is making Substack work?
I think it's the timing. I think it's the time of where we are in technology and where we are with culture. So I think a major thing, apart from the brilliance of the people who came up with Substack and who worked there,
Of course.
I think a major thing is how easy and sophisticated online payments have become. So the advent of Stripe was not a small thing for the success of Substack. I kind of feel like we went from the era where social media was coming up and was dominating because everything was free, and then there was a huge advertising infrastructure to support it, which is kind of like the Mark Zuckerberg era. And a new era started in the mid-2010s where payments infrastructure got really good, and people at the same time are becoming used to paying for online content and supporting their favorite artists or creators directly with things like Patreon. And I think since that time, we've kind of been in the like Patrick Collison era, the CEO of Stripe. And so that is new territory, and it's just getting started.
Yeah.
And Substack started in 2017. Right as people were starting to wake up to social media not always being great. It was pretty well loved before then. And also as the infrastructure was coming online to make it simple to facilitate direct payments and subscriptions.
Yeah. And you talked about how social media actually wasn't always bad. Like, I've heard you refer to Substack as, in some ways, or at least one of your product offerings, a bit like Twitter 2009. Is
Yeah,
that
it's crazy to remember that people didn't used to hate Twitter.
Yeah. Hard to remember those days. Isn't it?
Yeah, but Twitter in 2009, pick almost any date up to 2014, basically. Instagram also was deeply loved until around about the same time. 2016 and 2016, both Twitter and Instagram introduced algorithmic ranking based on engagement. And they started getting really expert at attention farming, which happened to be about the same time when Trump came onto the scene as a political candidate. And so we had this sort of cultural collision with this business collision and technological change. And I think around that time, if you go back and look at Google Trends, if you search for misinformation in Google Trends, you see it's barely a blip on the radar until about 2016, and then it starts taking off.
Yeah.
So social media, I'm 43 years old. I was coming up in the age of blogging in the early 2000s. I was a tech reporter covering the arrival of these major social networks. And I remember a time when people loved Facebook. I remember a time when people loved Twitter and they loved Instagram. And their feelings ultimately changed. They're much more sort of controversial platforms now. And I think the business models, the games that they're trying to play, or that they sort of are forced to play, are largely responsible for why people have these mixed feelings about them now. Yeah.
And I'm going to maybe make you a little uncomfortable and read something that you did say on the TED stage about this. And I want to ask you how you think they're going to help Substack steer the right course through this. So you opened your talk with, "We are amidst the most significant media disruption since the printing press. We are in the age of chaos media, a cacophony of voices online driven by algorithmic whims and viral trends, but the rewards go primarily to the platforms." So how do you see us breaking that model? You don't necessarily have to speak to Substack per se, but how do we get out of, how do we disrupt this current trajectory we're on and heal the divide or make it better for both the creator and the reader? Because I think we can all agree it's absolutely a mess.
Yeah, we are in a chaos era. And I think our media system's in chaos, and our culture, our political culture in particular, reflects that chaos. And we started Substack. It started off as just Chris Best, who's the CEO of Substack, and me. Chris was a tech guy, I was a journalist, talking about this problem in society and the negative incentives that social media had created, that everyone had to play by the rules of, whether they liked it or not, and what could be done about it. And our view was that it wasn't enough to hope for the perfect government regulation that's just going to solve everything, or that these dominant social media giants were just going to get better at tweaking their algorithms or get better at content moderation or something like that.
Or all of a sudden start really thinking about the well-being of the
Well, then, they're not. I don't think they're trying to do evil. I think they're just sort of. Well, this is actually the insight. Our view was that the thing that you had to change was the system.
Yeah.
Change the game that people are playing, and change who gets the rewards and what is rewarded and what is encouraged. And so Substack is really an attempt to create a better system. It's not just a place for people to publish writing or publish their video or audio. It's about creating a different media ecosystem with a different set of rules, where it's not so much about capturing attention, but it's about nurturing relationships. A subscription is a proxy for a trust relationship. As the publisher, the way that you succeed is to keep rewarding the attention and respecting the trust of your subscriber base over time. And they reward you with something that is scarce and important to them, their money. Or even if it could just be their email address. That's a big step as well. It's different from like mindlessly clicking follow in a feed.
Yeah.
And then that creates a different kind of culture. When you have a system based on those rules, it creates a different kind of culture. And that's why if you're hanging out in the Substack app today, it feels so different to what it feels like to be on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, any one of those other platforms.
Yeah.
And it's much lower with toxic behaviors and much higher with supportive, quality, culture reinforcing behaviors.
So it's an incentive game, which makes sense. Like we can see that you're working hard and you have a brilliant team trying to build and support incentives to drive that kind of positive behavior. What are some of the maybe invisible incentives? I mean, the reader-creator relationship and the paid subscription model is an obvious, clean, well-lit space, which many of us love. What are some of the less obvious incentives that you all are investing in to help drive that type of positive interaction and creation?
Well, I guess we could use this as an example. If you go to the app and you look at the front page of the app or front page of Substack.com, you get pushed, and the first thing you see is a feed, which is a discovery and discussion feed. And it looks a lot like Twitter, or it looks a lot like Instagram.
Yeah.
And so people look at that and they start to worry about Substack. What direction are we going to go in here? Are we just going to be another social media app? And people have these negative associations with social media because of the last 10 years of social media, forgetting there was a previous 10 years where actually everyone loved these things. Yeah. And our response is actually, yes, this thing does look like Twitter or Instagram, just like an electric car looks like an internal combustion engine car, but the system powering it is so fundamentally different that the outcomes are going to be different. Yeah. And so the rewards, the system that powers Twitter or TikTok is how can we keep people endlessly scrolling down on this feed so that they'll see more advertisements. And the system that powers Substack, the job that the algorithm is trying to do is to try and lead people into deeper relationships based around the exchange of culture. Because the way that the platform wins is the same way that the publishers win, which is to maximize the number of paid subscriptions that eventuate. So it's not so much, I guess that incentive is hidden in as much as people will look at that feed and think, well, that's just like Twitter or Instagram. Yeah. But that's just the cosmetic surface of it.
Yeah. And the culture of the space does feel very different. You refer to it often as a garden, which I really appreciate that metaphor. Would you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, what I'm actually talking about, so Substack is an example of a garden type of system. What I'm actually talking about there is we're in the middle of this massive system change. And so you're asking what can we do to sort of make sure the Substack goes down the right path? I actually think the entire media system is changing inevitably in this fashion anyway. We've gone from an era where there was distribution monopolies, like newspapers and television and radio, into an era of aggregation monopolies, where if you control the relationships between audiences and publishers in this giant feed, and you are the centralized ruler of that, you can determine who gets power and who gets attention and who gets money.
Yep.
That's the chaos system that we're now in, where everyone can have a voice, but the power still just goes primarily to Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or the Chinese Communist Party.
Those three.
We're in the midst of this inevitable transition to a much more democratized system, where the key piece that unlocks that democratization is not that anyone can publish anything anywhere. It's not that everyone just has a voice. It's that they can get economic autonomy as well, economic power, which is kind of like in the dawn of the electricity era. It was 1879 when Thomas Edison demonstrated the first practical light bulb. But electricity didn't actually become common in people's homes until the 1920s, because there was a missing piece. The missing piece was the electric grid.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, we had this uneven distribution of the power. But the Substack system, which is not going to be like the old one, which is kind of like, I've likened it to like a temple, where there's centralized authority and official opinion, official narrative, and only a few can have the power, to a chaos system where still only the few have the power, but there's many, many voices competing for attention, to a garden-type system where the power can be more distributed and there can be more biodiversity and there can be more voices living together and people updating their thinking over time and being more comfortable with uncertainty.
Yeah.
So it's a system that is more organic and more distributed, and where power genuinely can be distributed to the many and not just the few.
Okay, so on this, I think we can all agree that the centralization of power and wealth and influence among the platforms or Chinese government or whatever we want to refer to, there's definitely some room for improvement, and connecting the creator with the reader or the viewer as you go more into video and other formats is very positive. As was mentioned, I'm publishing a book soon. We've talked about this. And I actually asked my editor and my agent if they had any questions they wanted me to ask one of the co-founders of Substack for this interview. And they want
Simon & Schuster, is that right?
Flatiron. No, it's Flatiron with Macmillan. And they both want to know how you feel about the disruption that's coming also to the publishing industry, because Substack is also onboarding hundreds of very successful authors who are maybe spending time working on their Substack newsletters or developing a relationship with audiences or whatever it is, instead of their next book with their agent or editor. And I'm wondering if you have thoughts on how Substack and that kind of side of the industry might be harmonious as we improve things.
Well, on the harmony side of things.
Yes, you're free to start there.
Every author who has a book coming out should have a Substack, and every Substack writer has the opportunity to think about like a longer, more in-depth project that might resemble a book. These two things can be in dialogue and support each other and strengthen each other very well.
Yeah.
For the editors in the publishing industry, there probably has never been a better ecosystem to go discover new voices. Substack is a place where new voices can rise and thrive purely on their talent and their ability to build their own audiences, which many publishers should look at as a gift. And many do. And we've heard many examples of writers being discovered by agents and editors and going on to publish really successful books.
And also, I want to add finding each other. Like the author community on Substack is beautiful.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that a number of authors are not only publishing the newsletters on kind of what they're currently thinking and writing about, but some of them will kind of go on a tangent for a month or more and just share all of their learnings about publishing a book.
Yeah.
And then they'll host, sessions and basically helping other writers come into the garden
Yeah.
of being a published author, which
Yeah.
is pretty amazing.
Beautiful.
So that gets to be added to the harmony for sure.
Yeah. On the slightly less harmonious side
Yeah.
of things, the publishing industry is based on a very old business model that was invented not in the, what century are we in now? The 21st century.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the 20th century, it might have even been the 19th century.
Yeah.
And that model has been utterly disrupted by the advent of the internet and several other economic cycles since. It's not getting better. The industry is not in good health, really, the publishing industry. It's massively consolidating. These publishers are mostly doing layoffs. They're not going on big hiring sprees. There are not like lucrative new publishing imprints being launched by the day. And so what I think Substack represents as an opportunity, or it provides an example of how these old models can be rethought in a way that still supports the things that the old models used to support. It supports the dissemination of great culture and helps people who are very good at purveying culture succeed and thrive and pay their rent, etc. But it just isn't going to look the same.
Yeah.
And so if you look at the publishing model, for example, as an author, you're giving up the license to the copyright license for a certain period of time once you've published the book.
Yeah.
In exchange for that, you get some editing, which is really a really great part of the process. And you get design work, and they take care of the printing, and then you'll get some marketing support, depending on how well the book does in its first week.
Yeah.
Like that might be a lot of marketing support, or it might be a week of marketing support, and then it disappears. And then you might have got an advance that most publishers will never earn out. And even if you do earn out the advance, then you might get 15% of the revenue from the sale of the book each time, for every copy sold. That's usually you graduate to 15%. It starts at like 12.5% or something. You should never look at the contracts of these things. It will make you depressed.
Yeah.
But that's not a very good deal for authors, I don't think, especially in an era where you can go directly to your audience. And when things like getting support from an editor or getting distribution for your book are not actually as hard as they once were. We don't live in that old temple world anymore. And so
Couldn't you do both, though? Isn't there a way where you could, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of models where authors are both leveraging their Substack audience and community, but then also going the published book route.
Yeah, I
It doesn't
think
have to be
you can
one or
do
the other.
both. I think we're going to move to different models in the future where we'll look back at that as kind of like a hybrid approach that bridged two eras. There's an interesting publishing company called Authors Equity,
Familiar.
who brand new, started by by the former CEO of Penguin Random House, and the author has a lot more say and ownership, and they get something like 70% of the royalties on the sales. And so I think that's like a good model for like where the future of publishing could go to.
Totally.
In general, I think in this direct-to-audience era that the whole media system is inevitably moving towards, and that Substack is only part of, the goal for media companies, including publishers, should not be about owning and controlling talent. It should be about uplifting it and supporting them, helping the talent succeed, and then sharing in the spoils of that success, while also letting that talent retain independence and ownership to the extent they want it.
Yeah. Amen. So as Substack continues to succeed in growing its subscriber base, attracting phenomenal authors, it seems like every week there's some newsworthy migration over to Substack these days. I know Glennon Doyle's arrival last week or the week prior was very noisy.
Do you know what happened with that story?
No, tell us. We would love to know. Because
This is a
there's
sad
a lot of chatter about...
So Glennon Doyle, huge arrival, a major name, much loved, brought 200,000 subscribers over from her personal email newsletter and put them into Substack. And then there was some objection from some of the people who were in the Substack ecosystem who felt like there was a pie of attention that she would be taken away from them.
Oh, wait, can I
at
read
their
you what I
expense.
have here?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
This is a comment from one of those cranky people.
Okay. I wasn't going to use that
They
word.
say, Substack once felt like a small rebellion. Now it's starting to feel like another domino falling. And went on to complain about how we're just, this used to be this little village, this nice place where all the friendly, good people used to spend time together, and now it's starting to feel like a cutthroat city, and you got to kind of like fight for resources, and the magic is disappearing. So tell us what happened.
Well, it is a city, and it has been a city for a long time, and not all cities have to be cutthroat. There can be lovely neighborhoods in cities and communities that are...
In Finland.
Finland, only...
Yeah.
Maybe Denmark as well.
Denmark too.
New Zealand and
Definitely
everyone
New
else
Zealand as well.
Where are the flies? That response is interesting and a little bit dispiriting. George Saunders is a fairly major author who's been on Substack for many years. Jeff Tweedy, the founder of Wilco, Patti Smith, godmother of punk in New York.
Yeah.
Major names have been on Substack for quite a long time. And what happens is, I think some people... Being a writer is a scary and often lonely job, frequently done by very sensitive people who want to do good in the world and have a strong sense of insecurity. I'm just describing myself, you, everyone. And so if they find something that they feel clicks for them so well, like Substack, and it's so rare to have that kind of experience, I can understand why the feeling of change can be jolting.
Yeah.
It triggers the insecurity vein, reflex. And I think that kind of reaction can sort of block off a clear view. Because what happens when Glennon Doyle comes to Substack is no one leaves the writer who was over in the other corner building an audience quietly and finding their happy space. Nothing is taken away from that writer. Instead, with Glennon Doyle being a good example, like 200,000 people arrive on this platform and increase the population of people who are available to maybe fall in love with your voice and start to support your work or get interested in your work. So I don't know about the tiny rebellion being lost. Maybe, if anything, it's kind of like a larger rebellion now exists, if that's the frame you want to view it from. But I don't think anyone should be worried about the city becoming larger. I think this is a good city that people should want to be in and carve out their own space and build their own communities in, and create a rival city to the other cities where people really are living in a kind of Mad Max Thunderdome situation, stabbing each other on the timeline.
Yeah. I mean, yes and. We all only spend so much time online, hopefully, and only so many moments in our inboxes. I myself know I subscribe to a couple
sleep
dozen.
for a couple of hours a day.
There you go. I'm only going to read so many Substacks a day. And I think people are worried that if Glennon Doyle is in your inbox, you might not get to that sweet author in the village in New Zealand who's reflecting on season change.
Well, it's not the way we see how it works on Substack.
Yeah.
The app, for example, brings people together in this city-type environment where there's a lot of voices and a lot of opportunities to follow people down side paths and start deeper relationships with them. And that app drives more than 50% of all the subscriptions. It drives more than 40% of all the paid subscriptions. And so for the people who are worried about attention being scarce and siphoned away from them by larger people with larger audiences arriving into the city, I don't think it would turn out the way they might hope. If the push that line of thought to the extreme, and we should never have had an app. Everyone should just live in the email in their quiet corners and never have the opportunity to be discovered.
That makes sense. Okay, are you a LinkedIn user?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Most of us would answer that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been on LinkedIn quite a bit lately for a variety of reasons for Parallel Project. And it's gotten really terrible in the last month or two. Some of us have been talking about it. And I think the main thing that's going on is that LinkedIn's made it very easy for AI to rewrite your post for you. So something like 70 or 80% of what I'm reading now, including from people who I generally love reading from on LinkedIn, it's so clearly bot written. And it saddens me because I actually usually like going to LinkedIn and seeing what my intelligent professional peers and friends are posting about. What are your feelings about writers using AI to craft their Substack newsletters?
I'm not very scared of it. I think it would be bad if everyone just defaulted to ChatGPT writing their entire posts. But I don't think that's what's going to happen, at least for the ones that prove that they're valuable enough to build a community around. What I often think of is when I was in high school, I was learning how to type on a typewriter. And then I went to university. I mean, computers came on came online in the meantime. But in university, my poetry lecturer was saying to us how lucky we were to have Microsoft Word, because it meant we could copy and paste sentences and move them around on the page. In my experience with these AI agents, Claude is the one I use most frequently, is that it's like a superpowered Microsoft Word for my writing. It's a thinking companion for the thing I really want to say. And so I use it to help structure my essays, to test my metaphors, to suggest like rewrites of a particular sentence that I'm having trouble with. And it's like an inexhaustible, always-on editor who can help me punch this thing up and help me produce a better piece of work. And then I send it to our human editor at the company, who comes in with her own raft of changes.
Yeah.
And I'm really grateful for both of those people. Well, one, the robot, and the person.
Well, that's a great way of using it, but how do you feel about writers just like having AI write their...
Yeah, I think for a system like LinkedIn, it's not going to matter. LinkedIn, you could like replace all the people in it with AI, and the business would work fine. Same for TikTok, Instagram, Twitter.
Yeah.
Like, they don't care about culture.
Yes.
Culture is the human-to-human relationship based around culture is not the thing they're selling. The thing they're selling is something else, and LinkedIn is like, I don't know, the premium recruiting products or something like that. Twitter, it's the advertising, and Instagram's the same, TikTok's the same. They're all just becoming TikTok. In Substack, I don't like that kind of approach is not going to work very well.
Yeah.
Maybe it is for people who are like, just give me the information. I want cleanly written sentences so I can like choose which stock to bet on, or like how to place my bet in my fantasy, or how to construct my fantasy football team. I'm not really sure how that thing works. But Substack, and this is going to become more true as AI drives the cost of content production to zero and the cost of distribution to zero. Substack is about the value of human-to-human connection, the human-to-human relationships, the soul connections. And in that case, the piece of writing or the piece of video or the piece of audio is only doing part of the job.
Yeah.
It's the best expression that person could come up with at that time of what they feel is important to say.
Yeah.
And there's a community of people gathering around that important thing to say, because they believe it's important as well.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have the perfectly polished piece for that to be effective at that job. In fact, we often tell people, you should lower your standards for what you're publishing. You're not trying to write a perfect... you're not trying to write the perfect essay. One of the most popular features on Substack at the moment is Substack Live, where people go live on their phone, like talk to a friend, and they do a sort of public FaceTime call.
Amazing.
And it's really lo-fi, really low barrier to entry. It's not like you're not sitting on a TV set looking with pancake makeup, looking like really professional. But people like Jim Acosta from CNN is doing that and making a ton of money and having a really valuable community experience there. Yeah. So I think that the lo-fi quality of it, typos are going to become more valuable because they are an indicator of that there's a human-to-human connection here.
I love it. Well, I am, as a writer on your platform and a subscriber to many of the wonderful newsletters you guys host, and also a micro-investor through your Wheat Funder. I just want to say that we really appreciate what you're doing. I'm very hopeful that Substack is able to kind of stay the course and weather all of the temptations of scaling an evidently very successful business. And thanks for building what you're building and joining us today. It's
Thank you
wonderful
very
to
much.
speak
And
with
thanks
you.
for hosting me.
Yeah, of course, of course. Thank you.